back to It Happened One Holy Week. Today is the Holy Tuesday edition, where I, Clovis, just walk through what happened that first Holy Week each day of the week. So, yesterday we left off with Jesus heading back to Bethany after preaching and cleansing the temple and cursing the fig tree. So, today, the fig tree actually comes back in again. The disciples marvel and they're like, how you were able to do this? That's crazy. And Jesus says, when you have faith and no doubt, you will be able to say to this mountain, go into the sea, and it will obey, and you will be able to curse the fig tree and make it wither up and dry. Then they go to Jerusalem, and the Sanhedrin, he's in the temple, and the Sanhedrin challenges Jesus, and he answers with 3 parables. The first is of the 2 sons. There's a father, and he asked one son to go work in the fields or in the vineyard, and the son says, sure. The son says no. The first son says no, but then later changes his mind and goes and works. Then the father thinks that the first son's not going to do it, so he goes and asks his second son, will you please go work in the field, go work in the vineyard? And the second son says, sure, Dad, and then doesn't do it. The next tenant is of the evil tenants, where there's a master who owns a vineyard and he's leaving, and so he leases out to tenants, but then when the time comes for him to reap the benefits, and he sends servants, and the tenants beat up the servants, and this happens several times. But then the master decides to send his son and says, surely they'll listen to my son. But the tenants see the son and they say, this is the heir. If we kill him, we will get the inheritance. And so they kill the son, and then the master finds out about this and he's not happy. So he comes and he destroys the tenants and leases out the vineyard to new tenants. After this, Jesus talks about the cornerstone and how the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The last parable of these 3 parables that he tells is that of the wedding feast. There's a king who is getting married and has a wedding, and he sends servants to call out those invited because the time has come for them to come to the feast. But they won't come. Some of them kill the servants, some of them just go back to work. So the king goes out and destroys those who killed his servants and ignored his call. Then the king goes and sends his servants to invite all that they can find, whether good, bad, poor, rich. Whoever they can find is invited to this feast, and they come. And so there are a lot of guests in the wedding hall now. But the king goes, and he's looking at the guests, and he sees one man who doesn't have a wedding garment. And he says, sir, where is your garment? And the man does not have one. And so the king orders that the man be bound, hand and foot, and thrown out. And Jesus says, for many are called, but few are chosen. After this, the chief priests and the scribes ask him the question about, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And Jesus says, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. Then the chief priests and the scribes ask, well, what about those who have been married twice in this life? What will happen to them in the resurrection? Say there's a widow. She was married once, her husband dies, so she's still young, she marries again. In the resurrection, which husband will she be married to? And Jesus says, in the resurrection, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage. Then the Sadducees ask him, which is the greatest commandment? Name the greatest commandment. And Jesus says, the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself. From these flow both the law and the prophets. Jesus asks the chief priests, the scribes, the people around him, how is the Christ both David's son, but yet David calls him Lord? And they're stumped. No one can answer him. After this, the services in the temple are going on, and there are many people going and offering money, offering offerings to the temple to contribute. And many of the rich people come and they make a big show of putting their money in. But then a widow comes and she gives in her mite, her two small coins that are worth less than a penny together. And Jesus points her out and says, she has given more than all of these, for she has given all that she had. After this, Jesus tells of the end and of his coming, because the disciples ask, how will we know when you are coming back? What signs will we see of the end of the age? And Jesus says, do not be alarmed, for there will be many led astray and much destruction. But his words will not pass away, And though no one knows the day or the hour, therefore we must be watchful and prepared. For the hour and the Son of Man will come when no one is expecting it. Then he tells 3 more parables, that of the 10 virgins, where there are 10 virgins, and they're going to a wedding feast, and 5 of them are wise and bring extra oil for their lamps, and 5 of them are not wise. And they're waiting for the bridegroom to come, and they fall asleep. And then the bridegroom comes at midnight, and only 5 of them are able to light and trim their lamps, because only 5 of them brought oil. And the foolish virgins say, "Lend us some oil so that we can trim our lamps." And the wise virgins say, "No, there's not enough for both of us. Go and get some in the village." And while the foolish virgins are gone, the wise virgins are led into the feast by the bridegroom. And when the foolish virgins get back, they knock at the door and say, "Lord, let us in." And the bridegroom says, "I do not know you. Depart." Then he tells the parable of the talents, the 3 servants who are given money according to their ability. Well, their master is gone. One servant gets 5 talents, one servant gets 2, and one servant gets 1. The servant who gets 5 talents trades and makes 5 more talents, so he has 10. The servant who has 2 talents does the same thing, so he has 4. The servant who gets 1 talent, however, goes and digs a hole and hides the talent. The master returns and asks what the servants did with his money, and each of them presents their money as 10 talents, 4 talents, 1 talent. And the servants who increased the money, who did things with it and made it more, are rewarded. But the one who dug the hole because he was afraid, he gets punished and cast out. Jesus then talks about he says the parable of the final judgment with the sheep and the goats, how he will separate the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. And he will say to the sheep, "For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and in prison, and you visited me." And they say, "When did we do this, Lord?" And he says, "Whenever you did it to my brothers, the least of my brothers, you did it to me." The goats are just the opposite. He says, "I was hungry, and you did not feed me. I was thirsty, and you did not give me drink. I was a stranger, and you did not make me welcome. I was naked, and you gave me no clothes. I was sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." And they say, "But when did we not do all of this, Lord?" And he says, "Whenever you refused to do it to least of my brothers, you refused to do it to me." Jesus and the chief priests and the elders, or not Jesus, sorry, Judas. Judas starts to begin to plot to betray him, and the chief priests and the elders start plotting to kill him, but they say, "We're not going to do it during the feast because the people like him too much." And Jesus says, "In 2 days it will be the Passover, and the Son of Man will be crucified." And he basically tells his disciples when he's going to be crucified and lets them know what day it will happen. So that's been it for It Happened One Holy Week today, and we'll see you back tomorrow with the Wednesday edition. Have a blessed Holy Week. Rock on.